For decades, Germany has been known as the economic powerhouse of Europe, a country that rebuilt itself from the ashes of war into one of the most stable and efficient economies in the world. But lately, that image is cracking. Factories are closing, inflation is rising, and energy costs are crippling its industrial base. And now, critics say Germany is making decisions that protect its own economy, but put the rest of Europe at risk. So what's really going on? Why is Germany seemingly turning its back on European unity to save itself? Today, we're breaking down the story of a crisis that could reshape the future of the entire continent, the fall of the European powerhouse. Not long ago, Germany was Europe's model economy. It exported world-class cars, machinery, and chemicals to every corner of the globe. Its manufacturing sector, the famous Mittelstand, was the envy of the world. But the past few years have hit Germany like a series of economic earthquakes. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted global supply chains, and then Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 completely upended Germany's energy security. For decades, Germany relied heavily on cheap Russian natural gas to power its factories. When that supply vanished overnight, production costs skyrocketed. Industries like steel, chemicals, and automotive began to suffer massive slowdowns. And now, as Europe tries to transition toward renewable energy and tighter budgets, Germany finds itself struggling to keep up, risking not just its own stability, but the health of the entire European Union. Energy dependence and the Russian shockwave. Germany's energy crisis is at the heart of its economic troubles. For years, Berlin believed that it could balance morality and practicality, buying cheap gas from Russia while leading Europe in diplomacy and green policies. That illusion shattered when Russian pipelines were cut off. Suddenly, the very foundation of Germany's industrial power collapsed. Energy-intensive industries began shutting down or relocating abroad to countries like the US, where energy is cheaper. The once booming chemical giant BASF, for example, announced plans to scale back operations in Germany due to unbearable costs. To fix this, Berlin rushed to build LNG terminals and buy gas from alternative suppliers, but those deals came at a much higher price. The result? Germany's production costs soared and inflation spread across the continent. Meanwhile, other EU nations, already struggling with post-pandemic debt, had to shoulder the consequences of Germany's miscalculations. Critics argue that Berlin's past obsession with cheap Russian gas left Europe dangerously exposed. The green transition backfire. Now Germany is doubling down on its green transition, closing nuclear plants, cutting fossil fuels, and betting everything on renewables. But here's the catch. While the idea sounds good on paper, the execution has been chaotic. The sudden closure of nuclear plants in 2023 sparked outrage. Many saw it as a political move rather than a practical one. Nuclear energy had provided stable, carbon-free power. Without it, Germany became even more dependent on imported energy, ironically increasing emissions in the short term by burning more coal. And because Germany is Europe's largest economy, its policies affect everyone else. When German industries slow down, so does European demand. When Berlin subsidizes its green industries, other EU nations can't compete. The result is a growing economic divide, where Germany's green gamble risks pushing smaller European economies into deeper trouble. Germany's self-first economic policy. In the past, Germany was the backbone of EU solidarity. It was the nation that bailed out others during the Eurozone crisis. But today, that unity seems to be fading. In late 2022 and 2023, Germany rolled out massive national subsidies to protect its energy consumers and industries, nearly 200 billion euros in aid. While that may sound patriotic, it caused outrage across Europe. Other nations simply couldn't afford such massive rescue packages, leaving their economies exposed. Critics accuse Germany of using its economic muscle to protect itself while letting others drown. Countries like Italy, Spain, and France demanded fairer, EU-wide solutions, but Berlin refused to slow down. In short, Germany prioritized its own economic survival over the collective European recovery. And in a union built on shared responsibility, that decision sent shockwaves through Brussels. The manufacturing exodus. One of the most alarming trends is the deindustrialization of Germany, a term unthinkable just a decade ago. As energy prices soar and regulations tighten, companies are moving production abroad. Major automakers are investing billions in factories in the US, Mexico, and China, rather than expanding in Germany. Chemical, steel, and tech industries are following suit. The irony? The very policies meant to green Germany are pushing emissions and production overseas, weakening the EU's industrial base in the process. Analysts warn that if this trend continues, Germany could lose its status as the manufacturing heart of Europe. And if that happens, the EU's economic structure, which depends heavily on German exports and stability, could collapse under its own weight. Germany's crisis is more than a national issue, it's a European one. Between the Russian gas fallout, the green transition chaos, and self-centered rescue policies, Berlin's decisions are reshaping the economic map of Europe. But things are about to get even more complicated, because what Germany does next, especially in trade, energy, and EU leadership, could either save Europe or push it closer to another economic fracture. Germany's global shift, the China dilemma. With Europe struggling and energy prices still high, Germany has started looking outward for salvation, and that's creating even more tension within the EU. China has been one of Germany's biggest trading partners for over a decade. Automakers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz rely heavily on Chinese markets for profits. In fact, nearly 40% of Volkswagen's global sales come from China. But as tensions grow between Beijing and the West, Germany's deep economic ties with China are raising eyebrows in Brussels and Washington. European leaders fear Germany's dependence on China could mirror the same mistakes it made with Russia, trading long-term security for short-term profits. Yet Berlin insists it can't afford to decouple. Critics argue that Germany is once again prioritizing its own economy over Europe's collective geopolitical stance. The EU wants a united front on issues like human rights, security, and supply chain independence. But Germany's massive corporate interests often pull it in a different direction. This China dilemma highlights a recurring theme. When Germany faces a choice between protecting Europe or protecting its profits, it usually picks profits. The European backlash. Across Europe, frustration with Germany's approach is growing louder. Politicians in France and Italy have accused Berlin of economic nationalism, saying it's rewriting the rules of European cooperation to suit itself. The European Commission has warned that Germany's massive subsidies and unilateral policies could distort competition inside the EU. Smaller countries who don't have the same financial firepower feel they're being left behind. Even Emmanuel Macron has subtly called out Germany's behavior, pushing for a more united European industrial policy rather than every nation going it alone. But Berlin seems hesitant to share control or slow down. This growing divide threatens the very foundation of the European Union, because if the largest economy acts independently, it sets a precedent for others to do the same. And when unity crumbles, Europe becomes weaker, not just economically, but politically and strategically too. Lessons from the Eurozone crisis. If all of this feels familiar, that's because Europe's been here before. During the Eurozone debt crisis in the early 2000s, countries like Greece, Spain, and Portugal fell into deep financial turmoil. And who stepped in to lead the bailouts? Germany. Back then, Berlin insisted on strict austerity measures in exchange for loans, forcing struggling nations to cut spending and raise taxes. It was a tough love approach that left deep scars. Many Europeans still see Germany as the enforcer of economic pain rather than a true partner. Now, over a decade later, the roles have reversed. Germany is the one in trouble, facing inflation, industrial decline, and political instability. But this time, when it asks for flexibility or support, some European nations are far less sympathetic. They remember how Berlin lectured them about fiscal discipline. It's a full circle moment and a painful reminder that economic arrogance often comes back around. The political storm at home. Germany's internal politics are only making things worse. Chancellor Olaf Scholz faces enormous pressure from all sides. The Green Party pushes for faster climate policies, the Free Democrats demand spending cuts, and the far-right AfD gains popularity by exploiting economic fears. Public confidence is slipping. Workers are protesting layoffs, businesses are warning of mass relocations, and citizens are questioning whether the government still has a plan. This instability weakens Germany's leadership role in Europe. When Berlin hesitates, the rest of Europe stalls. That lack of direction is creating a vacuum, one that countries like France are eager to fill. But without Germany's financial and industrial muscle, Europe risks fragmentation. What's next for Europe? So where does all this lead? If Germany continues down its current path, prioritizing national survival over collective strategy, Europe could face another major crisis. Economic nationalism is contagious. If one country starts protecting only itself, others will follow. That could undermine the euro, weaken trade alliances, and fracture the EU's unity just when it's needed most. However, there's still a chance for recovery. Germany could lead Europe's green transition responsibly, sharing resources, coordinating energy policies, and investing in EU-wide infrastructure. It could balance self-preservation with solidarity. But to do that, Germany needs to rethink what leadership means. True leadership isn't just about protecting your own house, it's about making sure your neighbors don't burn while you rebuild. If you found this breakdown insightful, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss our next deep dive into global power, politics, and the stories shaping your world. And tell us in the comments, do you think Germany is protecting itself or betraying Europe?